You're teaching your child to read before they're 4. You're showing them numbers, letters, colors, shapes. You're preparing them for school, for the future, for success. And while you're doing it, you feel like you're being a good parent. After all, the earlier a child learns, the better, right? Wrong. Completely wrong. And what you're about to discover will change everything you believe about child development. There's a parenting habit so ingrained in our culture that few people question it. A habit that seems harmless, even virtuous, but that, in reality, robs a child of what they need most to become a whole, balanced, truly intelligent human being. This habit is the rush to teach, the rush to mold, the rush to turn childhood into preparation. Carl Jung spent decades studying the human psyche. He delved into the depths of the unconscious, into the forgotten layers of the soul, into the patterns that repeat from generation to generation. And one of his most revolutionary discoveries was this: a child doesn't need to be formed. They need to be seen. They need to be allowed. They need presence, not performance. But we live in a culture obsessed with results, a culture that measures the value of childhood by the number of skills acquired, a culture that turns parents into teachers and children into projects. And in this frantic race for early development, something essential is lost. The child's soul is lost. Play is lost. The ability to be present in the moment is lost. And what emerges in its place is an anxious child, disconnected from themselves, molded to please, to perform, to measure up. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself why you feel this urgent need to teach? Why can't you just let your child play, explore, exist? Where does this internal pressure come from? The one that says if you don't teach them now, they'll fall behind. That voice isn't yours. It's an echo, an inherited pattern, a shadow passed down from generation to generation. Jung said that parents project onto their children what they haven't resolved in themselves. And one of the most common projections is the need to prove one's worth through achievements. If you grew up feeling you were only loved when you got good grades, when you behaved well, when you met expectations, you will unconsciously repeat this pattern with your child. You will make love conditional. You will turn childhood into a race, and the child, feeling this invisible pressure, will adapt. They will shape their psyche to fit the mold you expect. But in this process, something inside them dies. The truth that Jung revealed is simple and devastating. A child doesn't need their ABCs or 123s to develop fully. They need something much deeper, something that can't be taught, only offered. And that is exactly what most parents are failing to give. Look at yourself now. Look honestly. How many times have you interrupted your child's play to teach something? How many times have you felt anxious when you saw other children the same age already reading, already counting, already doing things your child isn't doing yet? How many times have you turned a moment of connection into a disguised lesson? You're doing it now. At this very moment, there's a part of you that is more concerned with your child's cognitive development than with their emotional presence, more concerned with the skills they need to acquire than with the being they already are. And this concern doesn't come from a place of pure love. It comes from fear. Fear that they won't be enough. Fear that you won't be enough. Take a deep breath. This isn't a judgment. It's a mirror. And all of us, at some point, see ourselves in it. A child feels everything. They feel when you're present and when you're absent, even if you're right there. They feel when the look you give them is one of unconditional love or one of evaluation. They feel when playing with them is a joy or an obligation with a hidden agenda. And this perception shapes their psyche in ways you can't even imagine. When you constantly direct a child's attention to tasks, to structured learning, to the future, you are telling them, without words, who you are now is not enough. What you do naturally has no value. You need to be improved. You need to be corrected. You need to be more. And the child, desperate for approval, for belonging, for love, begins to adapt. They abandon the natural impulse to explore the world through free play. They abandon spontaneous curiosity. They abandon the connection with their own body, their own emotions, their own rhythm. And in its place, they develop a persona, a mask, a version of themselves that exists only to please you. Jung called this the betrayal of the soul. And it happens silently, in the small daily gestures that seem harmless. It happens when you interrupt a child who is absorbed in building a block castle to teach them the colors of the blocks. It happens when you turn a walk in the park into a science lesson. It happens when you can't just be with your child without feeling like you need to do something productive with that time. While you teach letters, the child is losing the ability to simply be. While you drill numbers, they are losing the connection with their own body. While you prepare them for the future, they are losing the present. And the present is everything. The present is where the psyche is formed. The present is where the soul is anchored. The present is where the child's true self has a chance to emerge. Do you recognize this pattern? Do you feel its weight? Then keep going, because now you will understand where this compulsion to teach comes from. And more importantly, you will discover what your child really needs from you. The root of this pattern lies in a concept that Jung explored deeply: parental projection. Parents don't see their children as they really are. Parents see their children through the lens of their own wounds, their own fears, their own unfulfilled expectations. And this lens distorts everything. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where you were only valued when you performed well, you will project this dynamic onto your child. You will believe unconsciously that you need to mold them, correct them, improve them, because deep down you are still trying to be enough for your own parents. And now, your child has become the field where you fight this internal battle. Jung said that most of what we call education is, in fact, unconscious projection. Parents aren't really teaching the child. They are trying to heal themselves through the child. They are trying to create the childhood they never had. They are trying to prove they are good enough through the results their child produces. And here is the devastating truth. A child doesn't need to be taught to be human. They are already human. They don't need to be taught to learn. They are already learning all the time naturally through exploration, play, imitation, and the innate curiosity that pulses within them. The role of the parent is not to be a teacher. It is to be a presence, to be a mirror, to be the fertile soil where the unique seed the child carries can germinate without being forced. Think about nature. An acorn doesn't need to be taught to become an oak tree. It needs soil, water, light, time. If you try to force its growth, you kill the plant. If you try to shape the tree before it has deep roots, you deform it. The same happens with a child. Jung observed that the child's psyche develops in natural stages. There is a time for everything. And in the first few years of life, what a child needs is not early cognitive stimulation. They need a secure attachment. They need emotional presence. They need the freedom to play, to imagine, to explore the world through their senses, their body, their movement. Because it is through this that the brain develops in a healthy way. It is through this that emotional intelligence is formed. It is through this that a child learns to trust themselves, the world, and others. When you skip this stage and force a child into the world of letters, numbers, and structured tasks, you are building a house without a foundation. You are creating a superficial cognitive intelligence at the expense of a deep emotional intelligence. And the result is a child who can read at 3 but can't handle frustration. A child who can count to 100 but can't name what they feel. A child who performs but doesn't live. Now that you understand the root, you are ready to see what really happens when you prioritize early teaching over true presence. First, the child loses the ability to play freely. And this isn't a minor detail. It's a psychological tragedy. Free play is the natural language of the child's psyche. It is through play that a child processes emotions, tries on roles, explores possibilities, develops creativity, and learns to deal with the unknown. When you constantly interrupt play to teach, you are telling the child that their natural impulse has no value, that what they do spontaneously is less important than what you think they should be doing. And over time, the child internalizes this message. They stop playing freely. They wait for instructions. They wait for someone to tell them what to do, how to do it, when to do it. And thus the ability for self-direction dies before it is even born. Second, the child develops performance anxiety. Children who are exposed to structured teaching too early begin to associate their parents' love with results. They learn that when they get it right, they receive approval. When they get it wrong, they disappoint. And this dynamic creates a child who lives in a constant state of alert, trying to guess what their parents want, trying to measure up, trying to avoid the feeling of not being enough. This child is not developing self-confidence. They are developing a dependency on external validation, and this will follow them for the rest of their life. Third, the body is neglected. A young child needs to move. They need to run, jump, roll, climb, dance. They need to feel their own body in space, develop motor coordination, learn their physical limits, and release energy. But when the priority is to sit and learn letters, the body is suppressed. The child learns that the body is an obstacle, not an ally. And this creates a profound disconnection between mind and body that later manifests as difficulty concentrating, hyperactivity, or an uncomfortable relationship with their own physicality. Fourth, natural curiosity is replaced by cognitive obedience. A child who learns to read very early doesn't necessarily love reading. Most of the time they read because they were conditioned to do so. The motivation is not internal, it's external. And when the child grows up, they may get good grades, but they have no passion for learning. They study because they have to, not because they want to, because the joy of discovery was stolen from them before it could blossom. Jung said that true education is what awakens the inner fire, not what fills the head with information. And the inner fire is only lit when a child has the space to follow their own curiosity. Fifth, the child loses connection with their own emotions. When the focus is always on the cognitive, the external, the measurable, the child learns to ignore what is happening inside them. They don't learn to name feelings. They don't learn to process sadness, anger, fear. They don't develop emotional intelligence. And this creates adults who know everything about the world but nothing about themselves. Adults who are functional but empty. Adults who perform but don't live. And now, the question you need to ask is it worth it? Is it worth sacrificing all of this so your child knows the alphabet a few months earlier? Sixth, the parent-child relationship becomes transactional. When you turn every interaction into a teaching opportunity, you cease to be a safe harbor and become an evaluator. The child doesn't come to you for connection. They come expecting to be tested, corrected, directed. And this creates an emotional distance that is difficult to repair. Jung observed that a child needs the loving gaze of their parents as a mirror to recognize themselves. But if the parent's gaze is always evaluating, measuring, comparing, the child doesn't see themselves as they are. They see themselves as insufficient, and they build their entire identity on top of this wound. Seventh, the child loses touch with their own rhythm. Every child has an internal clock, a unique pace of development. Some talk earlier, others walk earlier. Some are contemplative, others are explosive. There is no right way to be a child. But when you impose an external rhythm, a timeline of skills that must be acquired, you are telling the child that their rhythm is wrong, that they need to hurry up or hold back. And this generates a deep disconnection from their true self. The child learns to adapt to what is expected but loses touch with who they really are. Eighth, imagination is suffocated. The child's mind is naturally symbolic, imagistic, magical. It thinks in stories, in metaphors, in impossible possibilities. And this way of thinking is not immature. It is essential. Jung dedicated his life to studying the power of symbols, archetypes, and imagination as a gateway to the unconscious. And he warned, when you force a child into logical, linear, rational thinking before they are ready, you close the door to imagination. And with it, you also close the door to creativity, intuition, and the ability to deal with the mystery of life. Ninth, the child develops the feeling that they are never enough. Because no matter how much they learn, there is always more. There is always the next skill, the next milestone, the next expectation. And they never reach a place where they can rest and simply be. They are always running, always trying to catch up, always feeling like they need to prove something. And this pattern extends into adulthood. They become someone who doesn't know how to stop, who doesn't know how to celebrate, who doesn't know how to be present because they are always looking at what's missing. And 10th, the most devastating of all, the child loses themselves. They become what you want them to be. They adapt, they perform, they measure up. But the true self, the unique essence they were born with, remains buried, forgotten, undeveloped. And years later, as an adult, they will ask themselves, who am I really? What do I really want? And they won't have an answer, because they were never given permission to find out. Jung said that the greatest crime against a child is not physical violence. It is violence against the soul. It is preventing them from becoming who they truly are. And every time you prioritize cognitive teaching over emotional presence, you commit this violence. Silently, with good intentions. But you commit it. So what does a child really need from you? The answer is simple, but it demands a profound transformation. They need presence. True presence. Not physical presence while your mind is elsewhere. Not the presence that is always looking for a teaching opportunity, but the presence that simply is, that observes, that witnesses, that allows. Start here, today, now. Choose a moment in the day when you will be with your child with no agenda, without wanting to teach anything, without correcting anything, without directing anything. Just observe. Observe how they play. Observe what captures their attention. Observe their rhythm. Observe the unique way they explore the world. And as you observe, ask yourself, am I seeing my child as they really are, or am I seeing them through my expectations? This simple practice is revolutionary, because most parents never really see their child. They see what the child should be. They see what's missing. They see what needs to be fixed. But they don't see the child as they are in this very moment. And the child feels it. They feel when they are seen. And they feel when they are judged. Second step, ask yourself where your need to teach comes from. Take a piece of paper. Write, why do I feel like I need to constantly teach my child? Where does this anxiety come from? What am I trying to prove? To whom am I trying to prove it? And be brutally honest, because the answer rarely has to do with the child. It has to do with you, with your story, with your wound. If you discover that you are repeating your parents' pattern, if you discover you are trying to create the childhood you never had, if you discover you are using your child to prove your own worth, do not judge yourself. Just acknowledge it. Acknowledgement is the first step to breaking the cycle. Jung said, what is not brought to consciousness returns as fate, and you are bringing it to consciousness now. Third step, commit to a concrete change. Choose one thing you do frequently that pulls your child out of the present moment. Maybe it's interrupting their play to teach. Maybe it's turning walks into lessons. Maybe it's demanding results. And stop. Just stop. And in its place, offer presence. Offer an open ear. Offer unhurried time. It will be uncomfortable, because you will feel like you're not doing anything. But in reality, you will be doing everything. You will be offering your child what they need most, the fertile soil where their soul can grow. You will be saying, without words, you are enough. You don't need to be more. You don't need to prove anything. I love you exactly as you are. And that, this simple and profound message is what transforms a child. Not the letters, not the numbers, not the early skills, but the certainty that they are loved unconditionally, the certainty that they can be who they really are, and that this is more than enough. You are not the same after hearing this. You can no longer ignore the pattern. You can no longer act as if early teaching is harmless, because now you know. You know that every time you interrupt play, you are stealing something precious. You know that every time you demand results, you are planting anxiety. You know that every time you look at your child and see what's missing, you are wounding their soul. But you also know that you can choose differently. You can be the one who breaks the cycle. You can be the generation that stops projecting, that stops molding, that stops rushing. You can be the parent who offers their child what they truly need: time, space, presence, unconditional love. It's not easy, because you will feel the external pressure. You will see other children reading, counting, performing. You will hear comments. You will feel the fear that your child will fall behind. But remember, the race is an illusion. There is no behind when it comes to human development. There is only the unique rhythm of each soul. And your role is not to accelerate that rhythm. It is to protect it. The child who is allowed to play freely in their early years develops creativity, autonomy, emotional intelligence, problem-solving skills, and resilience. They learn to read when their brain is ready. And when they learn with pleasure, with genuine curiosity, with internal motivation. And that is worth infinitely more than reading at age 3 due to external pressure. Carl Jung spent his entire life studying the human psyche, and one of his most important conclusions was this: psychological health is not measured by cognitive skills. It is measured by the ability to be whole, to be authentic, to live connected to the true self. And that can only develop when a child has the space to be who they really are. Are you giving your child that space? Or are you stealing it from them with the best of intentions? The answer to that question will define not only their childhood, but their entire life. So breathe, feel the weight of this responsibility, and at the same time feel the freedom that comes with it. Because you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to know all the answers. You just have to be present. You just have to see. You just have to allow. If this script touched something in you, if you recognize the pattern, if you felt the truth behind the words, comment with the point that impacted you the most, like if you're willing to change. Subscribe to continue this journey of conscious parenting, because transformation doesn't happen alone. It happens when you choose every day to see with new eyes. The child doesn't need their ABCs or 123s. They need you, whole, present, conscious. And that is everything. Allow the child to blossom.